went to interview him. David Coleman, who comes from a family of educators. He attended the New York City public schools before he enrolled at Yale University. While he was a college student, he taught reading to low-income children in New Haven and actually began a program called Branch, which was an innovative community service program for inner city children. And as a result of that, David was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship, and studied at Oxford and Cambridge. After completing his education, he spent about 5 years working for McKinsey & Company, where he led their work in education, really their pro bono education work. He later founded the GROW Network, which was focused on using assessment results and making those results more useful to teachers, parents, and their families. The GROW Network was eventually purchased by McGraw-Hill, and not long after that happened, he left McGraw-Hill and started his own organization. He co-founded Student Achievement Partners, which was a group that actually led the development of the college and career ready or Common Core standards that have been adopted by many states across the country. In 2012, in the fall of 2012, he became the 9th president of the College Board. So we're really delighted to have him here this morning to share with us what College Board is doing to transform and really change its assessment system to make it, I think, far more useful to measure and help students reach college and career readiness. But also he's going to talk about what College Board is doing, in particular to help English learners across the country. So David, we're delighted to have you this morning.
Thank you. I guess I'll start and give a brief overview. Oh, thanks.
Absolutely.
Good morning. If I were to say to you, if I were to paraphrase the following, what would it remind you of? Years later, as he stood in front of the firing squad, he remembered the day when his father took him to discover ice. Anyone? That is a very poor translation. It is not only exactly right, it's not only wrong, it's not the exact words. It's also in English when the original is in Spanish. It is the opening line of Cien Años de Soledad. Yeah. It is, in my judgment, one of the mightiest sentences ever written in any language anywhere. If you go on in the first paragraph, he talks about a time in this village of Macondo where things didn't have names yet. These vast prehistoric-sized boulders and the kind of wonderment of a child looking at a world that is fresh and new. For an author to write about a moment in time when things don't yet have names is rather ambitious because, of course, it brings to mind the time when Adam gave things names in the Bible. It is no small act of authorial ambition to write Genesis over again and to announce that you are doing so. But to do it in this bizarre, right, firing squad, ice, to discover ice, which is one of the most daily things. But you know that feeling when you touch ice, when you're hotter? It does feel like a discovery again. It kind of has it is refreshing, it is startling. I talked to you about this sentence because, for two reasons. One is to honor this great man who died recently, who has left a hole in the soul of all communities and this community. And so I thought for a moment we could just pause to honor the truly great Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And also, Matt here is bringing me the actual sentence. So now let's see how good my memory was. And this, of course, is the great translation that Garcia Marquez was involved with himself. He begins, many years later, as he faced the firing squad, and I didn't want to give you the name because it was too easy then. Colonel Aureliano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. Isn't it funny that I forgot distant afternoon? It's worth knowing things by heart because then you learn what you forget. And you learn delicate things like that he says distant. At that time, Macondo was a village of 20 adobe houses built on the bank of a river of clear water that ran along a bed of polished stones, which were white and enormous, like prehistoric eggs. The world was so recent that many things lacked names. And in order to indicate them, it was necessary to point. Maybe I could just not speak and read from 100 Years of Solitude instead. But I have a point related to our discussion, which is this. My first meeting as the College Board President, any guess my first public session as a College Board President? Since it is the start of the morning, I'm going to do these guessing games with you, like annoying teachers do. My first public session was with 3 leaders of the ELL community at the College Board Forum. It was with the great Lily Wong Fillmore, Kenji Hakuda, and Guadalupe Valdez. Valdez. And we talked about the right for rigor in the English language learner community. Because, quite frankly, it is my belief that this right may be one of the most important rights to secure in this century. What do I mean by the right to rigor at a time when rigor doesn't have such a beautiful name? The right to rigor means that the beginning, let me just offer you a very concrete example. What Lily Wong Fillmore said is if you want to educate all kids to read with care, to read a complex text, to be literate in the deepest sense, every day pick a sentence, she said, and analyze at least that sentence with care. It was weird the envy I felt, because sometimes you describe education that is an attempt to catch kids up or bring a whole community into something they may not be fully part of. But this was work that I thought would have been better than most any classroom I'd been in. And that's why, couldn't we almost spend a lot of this morning talking about this sentence many years later, as he faced the firing squad? Colonel Ariano Buendia was to remember that distant afternoon when his father took him to discover ice. Like, what tense are we in here? What is when, right? Grammatically it's fascinating, rhetorically it's fascinating, and we have a choice in life, a very simple choice. Could we teach kids to be literate by giving them a simplified version of this statement? Right? That's a question we face as educators. Right? All they really need is the knowledge, they need the history. So could anyone offer a summary of this statement that captures Marquez's genius? I remembered when I was about to die, the day I found ice. It's like when you get into the sentence, every change like hurts you, doesn't it? The Gettysburg Address. Devote yourself to your country. There are people within our community and around it that seriously argue the way to bring English language learners into public life, to educate them, is to water down the text they read. I'm trying to be very candid here. In fact, it is one of the leading instructional responses. What Lily Wong Fillmore and Kenji argued so beautifully on that panel is without syntax, there's not syntax. Does that make sense? You can't learn syntax if you take away the syntax. It's robbing someone of the very... You can, however, focus. You can spend a day or a period on a paragraph. And that slowness, by the way, is a revelation for every reader in the classroom, the most advanced, those that are behind, in the middle, because anything really worth reading with that kind of care is precisely worth reading because it has a quality that it repays that sustained attention. So I thought I would start with that as a way of getting away from policy and debate to talk about a simple thing, which is part of the future of great teaching in this country, slowing down with a few wonderful things, reading them every day with real care. And is that an education, at least in literacy, that is immersive and exciting for all students, and particularly transformative for English language learners? Just something to wonder about. Could we dare to make it that simple? Could we dare to slow down? And does that maybe have to do with a word that doesn't have to go with rigor very often, which is zest or pleasure? Isn't it fun to have that sentence in your mind and heart today? You know, to remember it. Remember how many of you have read 100 Años de Soledad? But one thing is to read it, the other thing is to remember it, right? To really, right? You read it, but you lose it. And And he's trying to wake you up, right? He's trying to make you look at the world afresh. He's got a firing squad, then he throws ice at you, then he tries to make you look at things as if they're prehistoric and even as if they don't have names. He's literally working to awaken us in this opening paragraph to say, look again at my writing, something new's happening here, look again at our world, and that's like interesting. And every great sentence or set of sentences have that quality. And let me tell you something else that you may not know. So when we insist that students read Latino literature, what actually happens in textbooks? And I don't know whether this video is going to go straight to print, but this is somewhat controversial, but why stop now? I suggested this magnificent opening as one of many suggestions to be featured in the Common Core College and Career Ready Standards. This opening paragraph of Garcia Marquez, I think, is one of the finest. It stands up to anything. I literally would defend this in the face of every great book ever written. Guess what? What happened then? Well, if you read further in the book, some very unsavory things happen in this book, right? There's incest, there's a lot going on. I want to say in a clear voice, I really revere parents' rights to shelter their students, and I do, from these things, and I think it's a complex set of decisions. And maybe there is an argument that this particular text is a lot for a high school student to take, and we've got some complex choices to make. But I want to offer a couple of principles if we're going to make those choices. One thing is, please do not object to this and then embrace Oedipus Rex. Right? It is, to me, offensive to say that Oedipus Rex is a classic that all kids should read, part of the Western tradition, right, that explicitly talks about incest in a quite shocking way, quite more shocking. And then in this text, I don't want to make any claims about motive, but suddenly, when a black or brown person starts to talk about these more complex aspects of humanity, it is complex. We're not quite sure. So we have to navigate very carefully, because I'll tell you what happens today. If you look in textbooks where we have succeeded. There are Latino authors featured in textbooks, but you know, if you look again, what you'll find? No famous Latino literature. Because much of Latino literature, much of it, has sex in it. A lot of it has passion. Think of Marquez himself, Love in the Time of Cholera. Can you think of a Marquez novel where a lot isn't going on in the sensual arena? He's a sensualist, right? Think about Native American writing and how powerful a role alcohol plays in the expression of that community's preoccupations. So what textbook companies do is they hire people with Latino names to write literature that is never read within the Latino community. Isn't that interesting? It will strike you. It is a shocking thing to read this literature that avoids all the issues in the community that makes the literature too hard to touch. So I say this to you because I think that as we embark on this work, we have to think hard about our values and about propelling all kids to encounter the rich complexity that language demands of us, the world that it demands of us. And I think we should make careful, principled choices that are fair across about what kind of things can encounter. But one thing that I just invite this community to do, together with me, find single pages of wonderful sentences. If you can't get away with the whole work, let's at least get away with the beginning of 100 Years of Solitude. The beginning is magnificent. Help me find them. We're starting a website as the College Board that not many people know about called Cultivating Wonder. It's cultivatingwonder.org. And we're just trying to do something very humble, to take Lily Wong Fillmore's call for incredible sentences, typically at least a page, and wonderful questions to go with them. Because as I'm about to get into the depths of English language learner learning and policy and what is the College Board doing, we have enormous power to share and find vibrant things and bring them to kids and bring them to teachers and bring that delight and rigor into classrooms. And I think if we don't do that, and if we don't start to simplify what seems like overwhelming work, how can we get all kids to these standards? There are so many deficits. There are so many things that are hard. What about simple things done well? So with that strange introduction, let me tell you what the College Board is thinking about this. The first thing I'll try to say to you is, in the view of the College Board, the reason my first meeting was with an English language learner students, there is no way we can even begin to achieve our mission of equity and excellence, of delivering those things, without a profound encounter and transformation with the trajectory of English language learners in our society. Now, you can say it for lots of reasons. You can say that because of the force of numbers alone. You can say it to what's happening to our society. Let me give you some other data that may strike you. What I found out when I was at the College Board is something that may surprise you, which is those Latinos who are ready to do more. So when we often talk about the ELL community, I find it amazing, actually, that people spend so much time talking about English language learners in a very heavy deficit model. That is, these people just arrived, not to this world, but to our shores, perhaps, and they come and they barely know anything. They have so much to learn, we're quite overwhelmed. That's, to me, a common picture of an overwhelmed reaction. It is a very interesting thing, because remember, we're only talking often about a language deficit with all other powers of knowledge and learning intact and all sorts of other resourcefulness intact. So I want to shift, if it's okay, to talk about Latino students who are actually ready or ahead, just to shift the feel before we talk about English language learners, so who are behind. So of English language learners who are ahead, we found the following. So if you look at AP mathematics and you take PSAT data, of those students who, based on PSAT, are ready for AP math, so they've scored a certain level, we know they're ready, 6 out of 10 Asian students who are ready will take the AP math course. 4 out of 10 white students will take the AP math course. 3 out of 10 African Americans, 3 out of 10 Latino students, 2 out of 10 Native Americans. Interesting. We just gave AP Computer Science the exam. In 9 states, no African Americans took the exam. In 11 states, in 9 states, no Latinos took the exam. In 9 states, no Latinos took the exam. In 11 states, no African Americans took the exam. And less than 20% of the 100% of students who took the exam were girls. Now, you could say of the College Board, not your fault. You design a good course, AP Computer Science. We are not responsible for who takes the course. That's educators everywhere. But my friends, while it is not our fault, it most certainly is our problem. That is, if those numbers do not change, we're building a wall of inequality into the next century, which is durable. And we can and must change them. So what we've launched is something very simple. It is called an all-in campaign. It is on us, working with you, to ensure that every single African American who demonstrates readiness for advanced placement or other advanced work actually does it. It's not enough to give an exam. We have enough tests in this country, let us be frank with one another. What we need are more opportunities. And so we as an institution, it's great to make a great course or to make a good exam, but what is wonderful, what is beautiful, is if we actually work together with you to propel those kids into the opportunities they have earned. And then we should be judged on accomplishing that goal with you, and only with you. And when I look at Dave Spence and think of the Southern, his great leadership in this area, I look over at him and I can sense in him, yeah, let's get those numbers, let's do it. We can figure this out together. I look at Lizette and I say, let's do it in Texas. Let's get these kids in. And we've worked with Google and Dell. It's kind of cool to expand AP STEM precisely in those schools where there are all these talented minority students who are ready, who are not taking it. So we can get that targeted now, right? We can say, where is it? It's, by the way, only 1/3 of the time is it the absence of the course. And to tell you something interesting about assessment and politics, just while I'm warmed up here, if you talk to the great Barbara Jenkins, a superintendent in Florida, she'll tell you an interesting story. When she used teacher recommendations to place kids in advanced placement, less black and brown kids were put into those classrooms than when she used PSAT data. So we often are fearful, perhaps appropriately so, of standardized tests' ability to discriminate against students. But can I tell you, perhaps the only thing cooler are human beings themselves. Let us be very careful to remember these forces. And so that combination of data and human judgment, and perhaps data sometimes even as a correction of the tendencies of human judgment, particularly when you look at large numbers, needs to be taken very seriously to ensure opportunity, to deliver opportunity. So the first thing we're doing is this all-in campaign. if you are ready, you will go. And we can track these results. And we want to begin, you must begin earlier here. We're not talking about SAT. We're talking about PSAT. We're talking about PSAT likely, whether it's in the fall of 9th grade, in the fall of 10th grade. It is about propelling kids into opportunity. And not one may drop. We did this, by the way, with Delaware, which I know is humorous in this conversation, because it's like 10 children. Sorry, Mark. But the governor there, Jack Markell, decided he would make this an issue. And what he made an issue exactly was a next stage of development. So I know many of you may know that if you look at the top 10% of Latino performers and African-American performers and low-income performers in general on our SAT, so these kids are performing in the top 10% of SAT. That's good. Like, whatever the limits of the exam, you've done something, right? And they're in the bottom quartile of income. So they are poor in a non-trivial way. 50 to 70% of those students do not apply today to a single selective college. It's like watching a superb athlete. Most of the people in this room K-12. Raise your hand if you're K-12. So think about this. This is like a resourceful, remember, not a needy, like please not a needy kid. A resourceful kid who, against the power of poverty, has overperformed in the top percentile, and then they, perhaps with some involvement of their family, with some misunderstandings, whatever it is, betray themselves. And they do so on a vast scale. And we may be ready soon, and this is incipient data, so I want to kind of tell you, this is what I mean is, we're not ready to publish yet. We're doing this research in-house. We're the first ones to really be looking at these effects in detail. This, of course, is building on the great work of Carolyn Hawksby and other researchers that found this phenomenon, and we've now jumped on it. Because once again, you could say it is not the College Board's fault where kids apply to college. But it is our problem, because the evidence is devastating that when kids don't take full advantage of the opportunity, when they don't go to as challenging a school they can, it limits their future. Please do not think big fish, small pond. I know it's tempting, but it is false. You must hear this. It's very important. Please do not think you shelter a young person by saying, go somewhere closer to home, you'll be more comfortable, there'll be more kids like you. No, no, no. The data and the results are clear. This is not a question of opinion. It is fact. More academically developed students need around them kids who are themselves academically demanding. Often schools, if they go to a reach school, is a school that will have more resources to help them, and where dropping out is much more visible. So be very careful not to trust intuition. We need a campaign to ensure these students too go. But I'll tell you today what is not well known, which is our data show, so we're beginning to track these kids through college and beyond college, that the penalty that Latino students face when they do not take advantage of their opportunities is greater than that faced by African Americans and other subgroups. Isn't that interesting? They are not only more likely than the other subgroups to do it. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you take Asians, whites, African Americans, Latinos, and you look what percentage of the time when they've achieved a very high level do they not take advantage of the opportunity? Latinos disproportionately do not do that. And then when they don't, they suffer more. Their life chances of not completing college altogether, getting as high a salary as you'd expect, all these life chances diminish greater. I think we can change this. I think with the power assembled in this room, we could decide they shall go. Not just in this room. So as I said, the governor of Delaware decided this, and they used to have at least 1 out of 5 kids who would not apply. They, as of today, have none who have not. And if we're going to really do this, we might think of unusual allies. So I've been in conversations with people you know, with Sammy Rodriguez, right, who's one of the leading evangelical Latino leaders, and Torres in Philadelphia. And we are designing a campaign with them, and I know this may sound a little cheesy, to let our people go. That it is a biblical principle of the Spirit that when a student has earned so much as a family and as a community, it is our obligation, it is our ethical obligation to propel them as far as we can go. I've been talking to Delia about this and La Raza, and I think there's an opportunity for a very interesting campaign. So you see the 2 parts of how the College Board's thinking this. First, all in if you're ready for advanced coursework. Then, if you are ready for demanding colleges, we will put every force to propel you and count and judge ourselves on whether we can avoid this problem. And to give you a sense of how serious we are about this, last year we sent 27,000 packets out to such low-income, high-achieving kids. These packets included all sorts of information encouraging them to apply more broadly, and then it offered them 4 or 8 fee waivers to apply to college. Now, this is an interesting thing. It was perhaps my favorite day at the College Board. I've been there for about 18 months now, and I used to look much younger. And so students had come. We have something called the AP Insight Awards, and they're for kids who have really defied all the odds, taken, you know these kids. They're like, everything's falling apart in their home. In the world, Rome is burning, and they're taking AP and kicking it out of the park. Or a Haitian woman, speaking of ELL, as a Haitian girl, shall I say, she's 16, 17, announces in her broken English that she recently came to this country and that many of her teachers thought she couldn't take AP. And she took a couple of AP courses, and then she takes AP English. And like, when she gets a 5 in AP English, any notion of limited capacity should be banished forever from your mind of what can be accomplished through hard work. But anyway, so we had a group of these students talking, and then Rahima Ellis from NBC, who was interviewing them, asked an unexpected question. She said, and how are you going to now apply to college? And one of them said, I just got this packet, and I have fee waivers to go. And then a second kid on the panel said, yeah, I took SAT and I got 4 fee waivers. And she said, well, what if you want to apply to more colleges? And he said, I'll take another SAT. And I thought, like, that is exactly right. Because that's the whole point of this exam, is to grab more stuff, to grab more opportunity. And so what I saw when we sent the packets, a kid tweeted, put on Instagram a picture of the packet. And he said, the College Board has just sent me fee waivers because I am awesome. And I thought, how much better than because I am poor? So we were able to announce in Texas on March 5th a commitment of our membership, because as you know, our membership are all the colleges, as well as high schools. We were able to announce that in perpetuity, any student who takes the redesigned SAT, who is income eligible, will receive 4 fee waivers to apply to college. That means they will not have to say again, I am poor. If they've gotten a fee waiver for us, we spend about $130 million on fee waivers a year for advanced placement or SAT. So in other words, we're already identifying kids and saying, you have a fee waiver to take SAT. Why do they then need to say again, I am poor, I need a fee waiver, in order to apply? They apply to apply. Did you guys know that? Right? All these steps, you lose kids. And can I have it funny? There's a coupon effect, which I think is very exciting. What I mean by that is, you give someone 4 fee waivers, they don't want to waste them. They have their names on them. We can personalize them. It's a personalized ticket saying you can and must go. Now I need you, all of you in this room. Do we decide that it's not okay that no kids are taking AP Computer Science, that in 9 states no Latinos are taking AP Computer Science? Do we think that's a fact about the Latino mind, or do we think something's badly wrong? To me, there's no question about girls. And by the way, we can have common cause here with rural whites and similar patterns here. Widening the tent helps us as we think about this, or girls in computer science. So what I'd like your help with today, to enlist you, is in our All-In campaign, that all students who demonstrate readiness on an instrument like PSAT do take the advanced work. Do you know that particularly minority students, what's the best phrase, minority or these students, for African Americans and Latinos who take and succeed at an AP science course, do you know that it transforms their likelihood of majoring in STEM and completing it? So Stephanie, I know you saw this. I think David presented this data to the Southern governors, and they were like, wow. Like, these are precious resources that we can husband much better. So also in the application process to college, we started an Apply to 4 or More campaign with guidance counselors throughout the country. We've trained 12,000 guidance counselors in this, but we would love this community to stand behind us and say, not one of these kids shall drop. And I'll pause now because there's lots of other work we're doing. We redesigned this little exam you may have heard of called the SAT. I have some thoughts about rigorous coursework, what that might look like, but I want to give my poor friend Lucille a chance to actually interview. But I do really have an ask for you, which is we can't do this alone. I think there's a big difference between holding ourselves accountable, which we must do. I'm so sick of nonprofits getting big and strong and saying, whoops, look what happened. All those Latinos are not taking their opportunities. That is, I think the College Board must dare to own this number. Do you know what I'm trying to say? That is, it has to be finally at our doorstep that these kids actually go forward. But the problem is we can't do it without you. So someone named Amy Wilkins is leading that campaign on our behalf. Some of you know her pretty well. I aim to rope Julia into this as much as humanly possible, as well as other people in this room. So expect to hear more from us on this.
Well, to start, David, talk a little bit about the core work that students ought to take, besides the making sure they're in AP and IB and other rigorous coursework. What should they have in high school in order to be prepared? And how does that mesh with what you're doing to redesign the SAT to measure those skills?
Yeah. So briefly, we redesigned SAT. Why? The redesign of SAT is based on a very simple principle, really two. The first really powerful thing is that the evidence shows us that very few things are disproportionately powerful to make you ready. So I hope I don't embarrass you. Dave Spence and I were once on a panel together. And Dave Spence had done this work in California, and I will misdescribe it, he can correct me, where he looked at kids who got into school in California, into first-year courses who were failing. And he designed a course based on exactly what they didn't have. Isn't that cool? A 12th grade course. And he called it Expository Reading and Writing. Am I right? I considered this visionary then, and it's haunted me still. What is the first section of the redesigned SAT? And perhaps I shall offer this tribute here. Evidence-based reading and writing. Why? Because it's exactly what you need to do your first year of college. Can we make this unmysterious as possible? Right? Why should the SAT or ACT or any of these exams be shrouded in this weird mystery? So in 2008, the guidance counselors and admissions officers got together, they had a commission, and they said both ACT and SAT have gotten disconnected from the high school curriculum. Kids do their work in school, and they don't see it nearly clearly enough in the exam itself. So the redesign of SAT tries to make it palpable. This is the best work you're doing in school. Let me just give you a few examples. When you answer a question on a reading passage, and I know I like to get quite specific, in most tests today, you're done after you pick A, B, C, or D. Is that true of college or career? Or even a fight in your marriage? Very rare does the conversation end and say, B, we are done here. Most people want you to at least make up a reason behind B. Evidence matters, right? Why B? So in the revision of SAT, when we say evidence-based reading, students will only select an answer, they'll give evidence as to their answer. And I will get back to what that means about coursework in a minute. Mm-hmm. In the evidence-based reading and writing section, should you read just literature or literary nonfiction? Or should you also read science or social science? Well, what happens in the first year of college? That's why David, I think, had to design an expository reading and writing course, because he needed to break out of the framework of English language arts to a more general literacy, if I'm not incorrect. And think about that. When kids used to get an 800 on the verbal section of SAT, remember when kids were like, I got an 800 in my verbal, I got a 500 in my math, I kind of don't do math like I don't do Windows. And they call themselves highly literate people, even snobbishly literate. You know, I have an 800 verbal. But this 800 verbal person, can they read a science article? Can they read a social science article? Can they read half the reading production of the human race? No, because they hit the graph or chart and it's like, ooh, that's not so literary anymore. I say this as a guy with a master's in English literature. It's not that I don't love literature and literary expression, as I hope I've shown you, but it is not literate if you can't read science, interpret data and information, and combine it with text in the past century and certainly in this century. So in the evidence-based reading and writing, kids will now encounter passages in science and social studies. When they edit text in the writing section, they will no longer just edit for grammatical precision, but also see data and get it correct. In math, the breakthrough is to focus on those few areas of math. Lucille was a great math teacher and leader of math in her state. And what Lucille knows is it's all well and good to talk about focus in mathematics until you actually cut something, and then you reap the whirlwind. But it's time to take a stand. There are few things in math that are used over and over again throughout first-year courses, and so it is not helpful, as we do today with ACT or SAT, to say, we cover math. Or you can break it down. You say, we cover data, geometry, algebra, et cetera, which is math. So instead, what we did with the redesign is we said we cover 3 things in great depth. First, quantitative problem solving and data analysis. This means things like ratios, proportions, percentages. These types of problems pervade work life and lots of courses. The second is the heart of algebra, a mastery of linear equations. I want to be rather clear, this is a high-level mastery. So while you might encounter it, and as Lizette rightly argues, you should kind of get this down at the end of 9th grade, to command it is the continuing work of the study of math. While the other math I described is introduced in middle grades, you should keep getting better and better at that core to achieve the mastery that truly readies you. The next set of mathematics is what we call passport to advanced math. This might be the fruit of what some would call an Algebra 2 course, but it's deeper than that. It's about the structure of equations. It's understanding more advanced equations precisely in the way that opens up STEM careers and opens up opportunities for advanced work in science. We will sample from other areas in math. Controversially, and I hope we can pull this off, we are not allowing calculators on some portion of the math exam. Why? Anyone serious in mathematics will tell you that math is not a discipline merely of memory, but a discipline of the mind and heart. Kids knowing, having fluency at that earlier calculation, and also knowing what's going on enough in an equation, they know when to use a calculator, but when not to, is immensely powerful in mathematics. Not so popular with students, I will admit, very popular with mathematicians. And that's what we hope the College Board will be to you, an institution that can make evident that few things matter. And I will get to courses. I'm sorry I've gone so slow, but as an example of that, some things do really matter. So does it matter for Latino students and all students that they have command in this country of the founding documents and the great conversation they inspire? Can we dare require that? Well, let's not, and see what happens. If some people in a debate know the Bill of Rights, know the Constitution, know the founding documents, and others do not, who has more power in America? It's not even close. When we published as a sample item for the redesigned SAT, the Barbara Jordan piece, where she gives testimony in the Senate on the impeachment of Nixon, she gives a speech about what impeachment meant in the Constitution and what the founding documents say about it, and then the Federalist Papers say about it. And I happen to know the scene. A black woman is giving this speech, and quite frankly, the white male senators around her don't think much of this senator. They have all sorts of ideas of why she is there in the Senate. And as she delivers this short speech, this masterclass in the Constitution, one by one they sit down and start paying attention. It is something I've noticed in life, and I hope I won't offend anyone, that when a Latino person or an African American person shows command of these documents, white people take notice. It is an incredible, disproportionate source of power. It's a source of power in civic life and in your studies. They resonate throughout so many course materials. So we kind of did a crazy thing. On the redesigned SAT, there will either be a founding document or something from the great global conversation it inspires. Let's get rid of those thick test prep books full of stuff not worth reading and have kids brushing up on the Gettysburg Address and Martin Luther King and the great elements of the founding conversation and how it unfolds. So, what I've just described is a single assessment. This assessment is 3 to 4 hours long. I think we have to be very careful not to make high-stakes assessment so long that it breaks under its own weight. So elegance matters. Few things done well. And Lucille, when you asked me about what school looks like in 6th through 12th grade, I think it's those few things done well resonant throughout the curriculum. It's making sure in science that mathematics is included. Right? Because science teachers should really be doing data analysis, not math teachers. Because science teachers have data, math teachers do not. Makes sense? The history teacher is as important a literacy figure in studying essential documents as the English teacher. So as you're looking to help English language learners in particular, but all students make that next level, why not dare to simplify? Which is say there are a few things that must be resonant throughout their work. A core of mathematics that pulses throughout their math work. Align your assessments ruthlessly to this core. When they're writing, write about evidence, not without it, typically, after middle school. Because I think what America needs and what we need together as a community is a little sense of relief, is a little sense of it's not so complicated. Rigor does not have to be forbidding. It can be easeful and joyful. especially if we dare to stop other things.
Thank you.
Long speech done, sorry.
No, very, very helpful. So you mentioned a minute about the test prep books, and that takes me to another question. We've known for a long time that children of means have always had access to high-priced test prep that probably gives them an advantage. Even if it adds 100 points to their score, it gives them an advantage in applying to colleges. So talk about what you're going to do to help bring equity and equitable opportunity and access to all students.
Well, it's, interestingly, the College Board has spent 100 years kind of saying, not our problem. Right, we don't know the impact of test preparation, et cetera. But as I became the new president of the College Board and listened to people, listened to parents, at every income level, it's kind of interesting. Test preparation and its apparent advantages, its perceived advantages, I wish I could use a better word, but I want to say suck, let's just say art, is a very bad thing for people at every income level. For rich parents, I think it's an attack on their own children. Like, I don't trust you, so I'm going to train you specially. I'll get your essay written for you, because God forbid you put your true, authentic self forward at this moment of college admissions. Not a great moment of parenting. The upper middle, the middle class, they're jonesing to get, they're worried that extravagantly expensive stuff, can they get it for their kids? And we know lower income and low income families who just don't have access to it and either know or do not know, but certainly sense that they're being ripped off. So this is a very bad situation. And I think if the College Board is serious, if its mission is equity and excellence, it's time to shake things up. It's time to admit that test preparation, the perception of it, has deeply marred these instruments as emblems of merit, of hard work done well, and made them seem much more closely tied to ideas of you can buy it. Remember, the SAT was started, as you guys may know, because a group of colleges realized that they were recruiting from the same pools, the same white guys. That was the idea to disrupt a culture of hermetic merit. Isn't it strange that that gets recapitulated by these advantages? So anyway, the College Board, for the first time in its history, as many of you may know, on March 5th, announced that we will partner in a way we never have before with Khan Academy to provide free test preparation for the world. And what this entails is we have examined, we're beginning in math, all their math work, and it is beautiful. It is our shared aspiration with Khan, just so you know, to make this far better than any existing test prep we can see. Not like okay, like the free stuff that's okay, and all that aims at mastery. That is all that aims not at narrow test preparation skills. Let me just be rather frank. We have done everything we can to remove anything on the SAT that is vulnerable to a test prep trick or a quick or surprising tricky stuff. It is much better dealt with core mastery. And that relationship with Khan will extend to literacy, but that's available to any students within your care today. We began by giving them forms around the current SAT, and it will be much deeper. It can link tutors and kids and track their. It is not enough, I will say, to offer an online resource and claim equity. So we're also partnering with things like Boys and Girls Clubs and other groups, with America's Promise, with anyone who is intervening to mentor or help children so that kids have a living guide to these online resources to propel them through them.
Terrific. So let me open it up and see if anyone has a question for David that they want to ask before I go on. Yes?
Dr. Coleman, you know that, I guess it's Business Week. Thank you so much. That applauds schools for having, celebrating schools that get so many minorities into the AP classes and have a 3 or better. I hope that in your seat that you will continue to applaud them for doing that, because it really does encourage schools to get those children into AP classes. And the second thing is, I believe that you stated that you lose kids at steps. I think we're failing in our high schools by not working with kids at the easiest steps, because I think minority children may come from families who don't know how to apply to college. And I think they need to start applying in the classroom. I really think they need to do their essay in their language arts classroom while they're listening and parsing those beautiful sentences. They can also be writing their essays and having the teachers and the classmates look at their essays. And I hope maybe you'll urge in your packet, you might urge our our schools to start at that little step?
It's two things. Briefly, I am luckily for all of you not a doctor in any way, so trust neither your health or anything else to me. But I will say this. We will encourage such efforts like the U.S. News, I think it is, that Jay Matthews stuff that rates high schools in that way. But we want to make it really personal and much more intense so that working together with states in depth, we move from a celebration approach, which is great, to a zero tolerance approach, which is like, where are they? Why aren't they all in? And I think we can do this, by the way. So thank you. You're right. Like, let's do that and more. Second, could you repeat the second part? I just want to make sure I get it right.
I'm saying that they need to start in their classes.
Do the applications in the phrase.
Their essays.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just one thing I want to say openly. I think the data on Latino and African American parents is very striking, which is they actually have a higher value on college. We've sponsored this research with the New America Foundation, you can check it out, than the average white American. White Americans are in fact losing faith in college in an interesting way. But that faith does not necessarily trans into those families propelling their kids to take the most ambitious opportunities we have. So I think we have to make some noise to move families into a situation where they are supporting their kids to do the most ambitious thing. Your talk about school, it's very interesting. I was just with Molly Broad yesterday, who's developed College Application Week in 48 states now, and we are talking about all sorts of partnerships. So not only does the work happen in school of applying to college, but it begins earlier, in enough time. That's why you'll notice more focus in me perhaps on PSAT than SAT, because I think the real ideal here is to move kids early into those trajectories. They're applying to ambitious schools, figuring out financial aid way earlier. It can't suddenly hit you at the end. So early and within school, you're right. But not leaving out the need to move the parent community. Sometimes when we move things into the school, not that you would, imagine to ourselves, do you know who is the most influential in college decision making? Parents overwhelmingly. So we can't, as much as we are reformers who want to strengthen what happens in school, forget what a movement in the community looks like.
Over there.
Yes. One, would love to know how to partner with you to help to say yes, we're all in. And then secondly, we work with a lot of middle schools too. So from your perspective, how would you recommend this world be moved into a middle school? Because ultimately, if kids aren't moving into high school with those skill sets or opportunities, what's your perspective in terms of what middle schools can be doing to make kids more prepared?
To partner with us on All In, Matt Wagner is here. I'm going to give you 2 names and 2 email addresses. mwagner@collegeboard.org, Matt Wagner, and Amy Wilkins, awilkins@collegeboard.org. Amy is the leader of the All In campaign, and Matt happens to be sitting next to you, so he can help you even more. But also, the people who are running this conference, as this takes off, we'll be partnering with the Hunt Institute on this. We'll be partnering with Delia on this. By the way, this is my great way of dragging them in. We'll be working with Lizette on this. We'll be working with Dave. Aren't we? But we will be. We'll all be working together. We'll be building a small community. I hope all the people in this room have a sense, if I may pause for a minute, of the potential power of being in this room. I know, if it's okay for me to say, that you can leave a conference like this and go back to, not everyone has a deputy like Lizette, who happens to be Latina and has a lot of power in the department. You might be in a situation, regardless of race, but just a situation where you're in like the ELL group, it's like off to the side, it's not yet fully, numbers may be different, the politics may be different. I want my institution to be an institution that you feel through something like the All In campaign magnifies your power. And we will be careful about building partnerships with Hunt, with the institutions, with the Southern Regional Education Board, with La Raza, so that if you reach out to one of us, we are all then suddenly at your hand. So you don't all need to design these packets for kids. We will design those. You don't have to find fee waivers. We will get them to you. So know that you can become part of that. As regards middle school, while I've talked about the excitement of preparation of a much higher quality, freely available to all, the simple fact of education is it is not test preparation that readies you to college. It is the repeated work kids do in courses. So the redesign of SAT is meant to make much clearer that it's the work of, so we'll have sub-scores in analysis and science, analysis and social studies, not just verbal and math. Why? To show everybody that it's about this core, right? It's the analytic powers from those two disciplines as well as reading and mathematics. And so we are working, and again, this is more confidential, we're just figuring this out, on what the structure of courses before AP should look like. We have no business model, so I don't tell you that we've got this great new product of courses before AP, and they may even be free. But our mission interest is this. We think we need to design pre-AT type course structures that are very flexible so they can work in different states, but deliver rigor in 6th through 12th grade. Because without that regular practice of rigor, it's very hard to succeed at things like literacy or mathematics or any of these disciplines. So we're hard at work on this. In the meantime, my biggest advice to you is this. In middle school, there's no math right now in your science textbooks. I can promise you this. Look at them. Get math back into science. Give the data standards in middle school math to your science teachers and insist this is a focal point for them. In history, make sure a core of your history and social studies classes in grades 6 through 8 is analyzing primary and secondary sources. Do not say teach reading, it's dead on arrival. Make analytic writing, by which I mean writing with evidence, central preoccupation of teachers. Outside of, I would say, math, be careful sometimes of being too, reading and writing in math is a more complicated kettle of fish we can talk about. I wouldn't call it that for reasons I'm very careful of, which we can talk about later. But throughout science, history, and English language arts, analytic writing is a master art. It was got much less press attention, but we are sponsoring, together with the Atlantic Monthly, a new set of prizes for student analytic writing, modeled after the Pulitzer Prize. And you'll be hearing more about that soon. But we'll be doing a lot of work. There's a South by Southwest session I think you should see about, I think this technology is, it's not technology, it's more beautiful than most technology. It's a group of teachers from New York who, led by Judith Hochman. Peg Tyer's interested in this. She wrote a tech, and you can see it. We had Robert Caro, Lyndon Johnson's biographer, on the panel with us. And these teachers talked about teaching all kids how words like because, so, and these words really function, and it opened up their ability to read and write in beautiful ways. I'll make sure all our partners have that video, but that kind of work is very suggestive. So the College Board is going to be investing a lot in these analytic writing tools made available to everybody.
Other questions? One down there.
I just want to thank you for the direction you're taking the College Board.
Thank you.
Professionally, this is all really important, but it's become even more important.
Huh.
She's a senior, and we're watching her friends make decisions about going to college, and many of them, despite our very targeted positive statements to their parents and to the student, are not choosing to go to more selective schools. Yeah. I'm not talking about Harvard or Stanford. I'm talking about UC Davis, going to a Cal State, or going to a community college when they have other options to go to. So I would like to say for everybody in the room that I think we really need to move even farther into middle school, because the parents have such a significant power over their children. And in all of these instances of watching my daughter's friends not make decisions to go to more selective schools, the parents are helping making that decision because of the cost and the fear of the debt that they're going to either as parents take on or their children are going to take on. And that's really a barrier to them. It's something that I never expected because I didn't think of myself as rich. Exactly. And apparently I am, as a two-educator income. And we're first generation, but my daughter isn't. So it wasn't something that I felt prepared for, paying for everything, because it wasn't my experience, and I will be, happily. Yeah. And taking on that debt and taking those apart because I believe it's an investment in my child's future, which is also investment in my family's future. So I think that's something from my own personal experience that because I wasn't ready in spite of my experience, then I continue to wonder about other people in my community's ability to be prepared for that. So I feel like we have to move earlier to talk about what those costs are and what those waivers are. And so my final question, as opposed to my talking to you, is where do we find all those parts other than talking to Matt? Because I think those are parts that I really feel like everybody needs to be able to get to, and I don't think Matt's going to get to sit next to everybody's boss.
Yeah.
And to get those pieces of information out as quickly as humanly possible, because I feel like we need to start in kindergarten. The first thing I bought my daughter when she was born was a Cal t-shirt. The first thing my wife bought for my daughter was a UCLA t-shirt, right? So it started early, and I think in a lot of our families that doesn't happen.
What? Yeah, no, we have to be careful, of course, of creating too sharp a hierarchy here. But the theory is correct. But first thing is, as you know, there's cost and perceived cost. So I want to be very careful because, as you know, often it could be more inexpensive for kids to go to schools. The actual price they'll pay is different. But your description of how do we create an investment culture around education that pervades all classes of students and their families is a profound one. I think that there is the start early approach. I should not say in public that I endorse the first childhood toys being college t-shirts. People would really get on me as a college board president. I'm just kidding with you. But I think we as the college board, you can expect much more. It goes way beyond Matt and Amy. Amy's All-In project is about kids who are ready taking advantage of advanced placement courses. There's a much more broader access to opportunity campaign that's beginning at the College Board. And this is led by a gentleman named Steve Coleman. And we will combine every power we have. We'll rethink the search tools. We work with admissions officers. I just want to give you some sense of additional power being brought to this occasion. If you talk to Janet Napolitano, now at UC, she circled, I hope it's okay for me to say, she found the African Americans who, based on PSAT, were ready for advanced placement courses and to go forward. She circled them and she said, I will find them. Our universities can play a very positive role in trying to influence in a very personalized way that family dynamic. And I will say that while parents are resistant to general flyers and leaflets, they are responsive, and we have lots of data to show this, to personal information about their student. That's why, again, assessment, interestingly, used well, the PSAT data can wake people up. I couldn't agree with you more about this kind of like beginning. It's hard for the College Board to go much earlier than middle school in the first instance, so we have to partner going lower. But we are going to be thinking and working with partners on all sorts of ideas, including things like savings accounts and other approaches that make the cost of college visible and part of kids' lives far earlier so that the investment thesis carries. But I will tell you one thing just to encourage you. There is pretty exciting breakthroughs from behavioral economics happening in our society. Different ways of designing forms, things that seem much smaller than 12 years of labor to change people's decision making. And we should do 12 years of labor, but we should also be superb at all the nudges we can give families that prompt different application routines. And so we'll be investing in both.
There's a question over here, I think.
You've identified a whole array of partners, and it's really exciting. I guess coming here, I never really thought of the important role you kind of play as a bridger, as a bridge. One thing we've been talking a lot about accessing opportunity with this idea that if we can only get kids to get over that final hurdle and enter a selective university, for example, that opportunity will have been accessed. And I'm curious to know, as you think about your partners, if you could say a little bit more about how you're partnering with selective universities or honors colleges to ensure that these kids retain access to that opportunity once they arrive, right? We know that actually getting in is not the entire battle. And coming from a selective university where I worked with hundreds of minority kids that consistently heard the story of really, I don't have a place here. I challenge because my advisor doesn't understand where I'm coming from. And the sort of discouragement and the frustration experienced by kids along that 4-year path, I got here. For 12 years, people told me to get here. My dad bought me the t-shirt when I was in kindergarten, yet now I'm here. There's so much pressure for me to succeed, and yet I don't know that I necessarily have the supports I need to be successful.
You know, when you weigh on one part of the conversation, you always can distort. Like, so to be clear, we want all kids to reach as far as they can go. So that, for a lot of kids, and they can have a great life, could be going to community college and could be going to a wide range of colleges. So I do want to be rather clear that I'm not just saying like selective or bust just as a kind of policy matter. Because I think but what I am arguing trenchantly and bluntly, and am willing to take criticism for, is with all the challenges that you just listed, which are true, it is better for that kid if they are academically ready to be in the selective place than it is in the less selective place. And that's the illusion we can have. I'm avoiding your question for a minute, but I just want to be very strict here, because as tough as it can be, all those disappointments, all those feelings of not fitting in, the data is overwhelming that that is much better for the future trajectory of that student, whatever pains they suffer, than being in an environment which doesn't challenge them as the alternative. Now you ask me, once we've done that work, what about the work while they're within college? We're looking into this. So this would be new for the College Board. It's new for the College Board to be as purposeful about where kids are applying, about catapulting them to AP, trying to work on 6 through 12. We're thinking, at the edge of our thinking, a lot about the first year of college, in particular, in financial aid. We today are mostly admissions officers and financial aid officers. We're wondering whether student services will soon become the third leg of the College Board triad in terms of its presence. And we're thinking a lot about first year success. As you know, if they make it through the first year and the transition to sophomore year, the chances of retention are far higher. Some of the ugliest stuff happens very near the beginning with money for books and all sorts of stupid stuff that happens at the very outset that, I know you know all this, gets kids to disconnect. So we're working very hard on this. There are two excellent African-American young scholars who are obsessed with this, who have just decided to partner with us. So we are looking into, can the College Board look across institutions to come up with some generally very powerful tools that could be shared broadly to propel kids into success at the beginning of college.
I think we have time for just a couple quick ones. One more. I see a hand here. I know there's another one over there. We'll do these quickly, all right? Very quickly. Go ahead.
Along with this, in West Virginia, which your predecessor actually was from,
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I heard that one of the biggest barriers for children entering post-secondary education was the lack of a completed FAFSA form. And we live in that district where our real subgroup is rural poverty.
Yeah.
Tremendous, with no hope, no vision for a better future.
Yeah.
No way really out. So we've started a campaign, and it's been driven by the College Foundation of West Virginia. They monitor the number of students that complete the FAFSA, and so our own high schools have now taken that under their wing as something that is part of the senior project, trying to at least get the students to complete it. My most rural and most poor high school raised theirs from 23% 2 years ago to 50% this year.
Yeah.
So we're making strides.
Yeah.
But it is something we have to think about. It's those little details sometimes. When you, as I always tell kids, don't look at the sticker price.
Yeah.
Just stay off the sticker price. We'll work on the money. Thank you.
Yeah, no, briefly, we've been building to scale a net price calculator, as you know, to try to get away from the sticker price. And one of our key partners in the Access to Opportunity campaign is all this financial aid kind of. I will tell you, I think we have to radically simplify these procedures. Every complexity in the financial aid process or in the admissions process, the multi-step, if I can be frank with you, discriminates against poor children. It keeps out the very kids we want in. So I think the College Board has a dual obligation. Make sure we track and help propel kids to get to 100% doing it, but also simplify so your average human being and family can much more easily do admissions and do these procedures. I think that's the other side of it.
Take the last one down there.
Hello. Good morning, my people. Good morning. So I have the great joy and honor to work in an alternative continuation charter school. So I have a school full of those kids. I have a school full of kids who the traditional system totally discounted. And you imagine their face from kinder to 9th, 10th, 11th grade of those kids that slip in the cracks, and I'm there to catch them. And what I would like to know is about your outreach to those students. Because what I see and what all of us know is the wealth and the beauty of knowledge that they come to me with. And we're working at translating that into academic success. And but the majority of my kids are 17, 18, 19 years old. And this conversation has helped me commit to using our funding to get AP courses for my kids. I'm in San Diego, very high Spanish only rate. So they come in with this gift of their language. They need AP Spanish. So I got that, thank you. What is your outreach to continuation schools? Because every district has a continuation school, every county has them. Yeah. And what is your focus and your outreach to us? And have a good day, my people.
I think the College Board has not yet done enough in this area, so I don't want to be satisfied with it. I think that Michelle Cahill in New York is a bit of a genius on these matters, and you should reach out to her. She's very thoughtful about this. But I'll tell you one thing we're thinking about. We have something called AccuPlacer today, which is about college credit placement. We're thinking of something before it called Accelerator, which answers the question, not am I behind or not, because God forbid, like these kids know they are behind. But what they face is a kind of bone-crushing litany of what they need to do to catch up. What we're trying to figure out is, can we design a tool free for these kids that says, these few things will most accelerate you and is where you should overwhelmingly focus. We're also thinking of pre-AP/AP courses, a kind of middle ground between before AP and AP, that is designed for these kids to be kind of intensive courses to catch them up. I really am borrowing here from the genius of Dave Spence on kind of, can you dare design a couple of courses that over-focus on such essential stuff that even a kid who's really behind can dig into that material and really accelerate forward. So those are the kinds of things we'll be doing in the future. And thank you so much for your attention, and apologies for my long-windedness. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, David.